Recording the session now. So when you look at mediation, what would you say, and can you elaborate on the ethics behind the mediation process? Javad.
Thank you, Tasneem. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. Tasneem, I feel that the ethics of mediation are actually integral to the very essence of what the mediation process is all about.
Mm-hmm.
To borrow from ADR ODR International's training manual, a mediation is not a mediation if it is not voluntary, 1, confidential, 2, without prejudice, 3, and the mediator's neutrality is the 4th thing, and the party's right to determine the outcome. In other words, the party's right of self-determination, that's the 5th point. So just to see what this means in the common lingo, voluntary means that parties have to participate in the process of their own volition. They have a choice of walking out of the process at any stage. So unlike what you see in litigation or arbitration, where they are compelled to suffer the proceedings or face the decree or award which can be executed against them, in mediation they can choose to walk out without suffering any consequences, except of course what might follow if the next recourse is litigation or arbitration.
Mm.
Understand confidential, we need to understand the difference between the nature of information shared in the the conventional dispute resolution processes like litigation and arbitration on the one hand, and mediation on the other. Because in the first two, what is shared is actually sanitized information on legal rights and positions. Now, in the latter, that is in mediation, parties share much more than that. They share their feelings, their emotions, their fears, their concerns. It's all out there in the raw. The parties trust the mediator on the process, and that's why they open up. Talking about without prejudice, the mediation is nothing but a facilitated negotiation. So parties should have the freedom to make offers, admissions, proposals, explore different options without the being held bound to them. So therefore, mediation is a without prejudice process. Nothing binds the parties till they reach a final agreement. Now, if the mediation fails, it does not alter their positions in any way. Continue to remain where they were before the mediation commenced. Neutrality is a bit of a, mediator neutrality when you're talking about, it's a bit of a dicey issue. Neutrality, as they say, is the state of mind, and impartiality is how it is expressed. So essentially, it is understood as the mediator not having any stake in the outcome of the mediation or any connection to the parties. But I think it's much more complex than that. So mediators are, after all, human beings and victims of biases, prejudices, ideologies, values, beliefs, which you mentioned when you started. So what does neutrality therefore mean in this backdrop is a discussion in itself, which hopefully we'll be able to engage today. Now, coming to self-determination, conflicts between two people, groups, or communities or countries have always been adjudicated by third parties who decide on what are called as positional binaries, whether they're right or wrong, good or bad, rights or liabilities, or so on. So mediation operates on a different paradigm altogether. It is based on interest and needs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Javad. Virash, do you want to add anything to this?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Nice to see everyone, and thank you for being a part of this. To add on to what Jawad has been saying, yes, the principles that he mentioned are critical and vital to the mediation process. Impartiality of the mediator. It's easier for trainers to say to the mediators, be impartial. It just sounds too good to be true when the clients hear it. So they are watching you and they're monitoring you, and you have to conduct yourself in an impartial way. When it comes to confidentiality, I think for mediators, you need to learn how to practice keeping secrets, because you have to be able to understand that what is said, what is private remains private. Because if you breach that confidentiality, it will affect your impartiality and your trustworthiness that the clients have in you. Another thing is ethically, be competent in the subject matter. If you're not well versed in the subject matter or the information that the parties require, do not take on that mediation, because you must be able to mediate competently. So with that, you must be able to manage the process competently and fairly. Be careful, as Javad spoke about decision making. It's not your decision; it's the party's decision. Be transparent. You have an ethical standard to maintain, and the parties must be able to develop trust in you. If you see there's a power imbalance, call it out, and let parties know that they're here to work constructively towards a resolution. Especially if you see an abuse of the process where parties are using it to gain access to documents or to intimidate another person, come back to that and say that mediation is a constructive process. I just want to say to people that, to everyone, that you as a mediator, your ethics and professionalism and your good standards of conduct can have an effect on how you are rated as a mediator.
So when I'm listening to both of you and hearing about the ethics behind the mediation process, you're the neutral person and you have your own thoughts and feelings and emotions and personality, and that comes into this whole process. So, and you are balancing the rights of each of the parties to come up with the best solution. So it's almost like each mediator needs some form of moral compass. So what would you say? What do you see as your moral compass?
Well, for me, I'm not sure if Javad's answering, so I can't hear him.
I think Javed has lost connection briefly.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm here now.
Oh, you're back. Good, Javed.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Virash, you're answering that, or do I?
I'll just answer them. My moral compass, well, for one, is that I know the profession requires me to be neutral and impartial. And that's where I start.
Okay. So that's your position. That's your big picture sort of thing. In whenever you're faced with something, as your big picture that what the end in mind really has to be as part of your role.
Yes.
And Javed?
Yeah, the same. See, actually, when you say moral compass, the idea that comes in mind is morality, which is a very subjective idea, because it can be understood differently in different social, cultural, religious milieus. Mm-hmm. So what may be morally right in one culture, maybe may not be right in another. So there are these very strong binaries of right and wrong in when you talk of morality. And mediators being humans, after all, we are brought up in a particular culture, we are taught certain values, we are told to believe in a particular religion, we grow up in a certain environment. So all of these, what we learn in this ecosystem gets embedded in our psyche, and it virtually defines who we are. So we grow up with a lot of beliefs, prejudices, biases, some of which we are conscious of, some we are not conscious of. So what you called just now as unconscious biases. But I think there are some, overarching realities that transcend these, values and beliefs. And it has something to do with probably our evolution and struggle for survival. The reality is that, humans are imbibed with a sense of fairness. And that sense of fairness is reflected, in attributes like honesty and integrity. So how I see the moral compass of the mediator is to transcend those personal beliefs and values and stay true and honest to the process and to the role as a mediator. So no matter what my personal beliefs and values are, can I rise above those and be honest to the process? So the question I ask is, can I maintain my neutrality when certain information or events trigger my, unconscious biases, and see how they're affecting my attitude towards the parties? Am I applying my standards to judge the parties before me, or am I open enough to respect their own standards? Am I being fair? So I think if I'm honest with myself on these issues and can maintain the integrity of the process, that would be the moral compass that I would follow. I hope you were able to hear me.
I think you raised a very good point, Javed, that the moral compass can be different in different cultures. And you have to keep asking yourself that, am I fair?
Yes.
Am I being fair? And it's still that big question picture, right? The end in mind. That, am I being fair? Am I being right to this process? So you're constantly reflecting as a mediator and reflecting within yourself. And have you noticed your unconscious or conscious bias? I know you've mentioned it, Javed, but have you noticed how that comes in? Have you come across it and said, oh no, I've got to sit back and go forward?
Yes. Yeah, I did, Tasneem. In fact, I want to mention a very specific case in which I myself did not realize actually that this bias was there in me. Mm-hmm. But the party wanted to withdraw from the mediation because of, you see, it happened like this actually. There was this couple, I was mediating a custody issue between a husband and wife, and they had a 5-year-old son. And the complaint of the husband was that she was sending the son out in the hot sun during midday, when her gym instructor used to come and take classes for her. And this boy was left in the custody of domestic help without even water or food to eat. So the father case was that she's unfit, and the mother did not deny any of this, and in fact she just agreed to all that. But I don't know what happened, and at just a couple of sessions later, she said that this was a court annex mediation, and she said that I don't think I have this feeling that you're biased towards me. Now, to the best of my recollection, I didn't say or do anything that would have reflected any kind of bias, but probably she sensed that maybe the way I looked at her at that time when the husband was telling me this, or maybe I don't know what exactly it was, but that was when I realized how unconscious bias can really even if you don't show it, maybe some vibration from you, some body language, some cue that might get transmitted accidentally might convey that impression to the parties. So then I realized how important it is to be because I'm very sensitive about children.
Yeah.
And
so it did
sensitivity
come through.
Yes, it did come through.
Yeah.
So I'm so sensitive about children. If I see even in a movie something bad happening to children, I turn away. Okay.
Yeah.
But
it's so interesting because this is human beings. Whatever you don't say, 73% of communication is nonverbal.
Nonverbal.
So you didn't realize yourself that this unconscious bias was being projected, but she did. And then on reflection, you realize your own sensitivity to children.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. And Virash, have you noticed any?
Yes. When you start out mediating, when you're sitting in your first mediation or around the first time you start mediating, you start to feel uncomfortable when certain behaviors of the participants or what they say affects your listening skills, because you're either relating to them or to one person, or you're taking offense, or you're trying to formulate an answer. And I like that you said 73% of language is non-verbal. It's because what happens to you is that if you're starting to feel this bias coming in, it will affect your physiology, it'll affect the way you speak, it'll affect the way you react. And what happens is the participants and the clients, they pick up on that. And they start to lose confidence in your abilities, which will then lead them to lose confidence in the process. So you have to be able to find and understand your triggers, your biases, because you have to be able to learn from it. And it will affect your competency if you leave it unchecked. As a mediator, you have to manage your advertising, so the word of mouth that gets out there from the clients itself. And you do not want people to describe you as a biased mediator. So you have to get yourself in check and deal with those triggers. You have control over those triggers. Just always remember, it's not about you, it's about the process, and the outcome belongs to the participants.
So it really emphasizes that a mediation, as the profession, the skill, has a lot of self-development involved in it. You're always checking on you. Yeah. And having to work on the process, and we call it emotional intelligence, is how do you manage that reactive brain from the brain that is the creative, the human brain, and how do you build that bridge in the between, that you recognize something, you've got to navigate through it, and especially through your emotions, so that you're seen in a very unbiased way. Yeah,
that's right.
And I know it comes up, and Rahim, I'm going to ask you, what do you do when you recognize it?
Panic.
Panic.
It's the thing that, you know, as a trainer as well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling delegates about the idea of neutrality and unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly I realize I'm doing it, and I go, oh no, what an awful teacher I am, because I tell my students to do one thing, and then I go and have it myself. And I realize it's just one of those, you know, like Jawad said, it's a survival instinct. You have to judge surroundings, you have to work on it. So for me, and this is really great with this whole online world, is I switch off the screens from them. I just need I need time out, and I can just sit back and go, right, what have I said? Why did I say what I said? I'll give you an example. I was doing a mediation a few weeks ago where one party was extremely poorly represented by a certain kind of lawyer that I've come across before, that really didn't want to engage in mediation, could see the pound signs or the dollar signs in the litigation, and really made no secret about the fact that this was a complete waste of time.
Mm.
But the client wanted to engage. But every time the client tried to come up with a decent deal, and he would then ask his lawyer, what do you think? It was very clear that but for the lawyer, the client may have done a good deal today. And we didn't settle that mediation. And my behavior, every time I came into that room, the moment I saw that lawyer, would trigger a certain level of anger and a certain level of animosity to change my being in that room. Every time I wanted to engage, I was very conscious, and I would try to alienate the lawyer to a certain extent, because I wanted the client to do a deal, because I could see that the lawyer didn't really care. And my biases were just, they were, you know, if you were to...
Very difficult situation.
Yeah, if you could see a screen of my biases, I had biases everywhere. I mean, I was probably bordering a bit of racism too, because it was, you know, I need to separate this. And I looked at my toolbox and I said, what tools do I have? But the moment I stopped and had a little think, I had a break and I made a cup of tea, and I realized my behavior was so bad. Then I went back and I looked into that room, and I changed my complete approach.
Yeah.
Now, we still didn't settle, but I was able to go back and allow both of them the space to say, look, if this is where you are, this is where you are. I can't force you to settle, but I need to change my whole attitude. And so when you recognize that you have to do something about it. You have to, and the worst time to recognize it is at the end of a mediation, when it's too late. So I think it's really important that mediators take time to reflect on the previous session, reflect on why did they behave the way they did. Did that, because I'd go to the other room and I had what I would call very sensible, people who were trying really hard, and I was very friendly towards them in helping them find a deal. But that was where I was falling short. And I did something about it.
You know, you've brought three very valuable points up, Rahim. One was that a lot of our mediation is online now. So being able to take that break, you know, when you're face to face with somebody in a room, they can pick up all your energy at every time. The neurons just fire. But, you know, having the screen, you can almost take that break, even if it's for a few seconds. And it is about taking that break. Because if you come into that fury state and they can read all that emotional bias and anger in you, they're going to become more defensive, more defensive, because, you know, you want to attack. That's your normal behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point. It's about knowing and the other point that you made is to not do it at the end when it's too late. It's like, how do you manage it right in the middle of the process by taking a break or reflecting a bit and repositioning your mind? You know, like I said, it's, you know, when you have the emotional intelligence, is having the ability to see ourselves in action and then slow down to observe ourselves, thinking through the situation. Remember that our brains are constantly searching for what we see and to predict what we expect. They just work. So it's about, you know, how do you stop that process? Are there times, Rahim, when you see this has worked as an advantage?
Not really.
Not really.
No, I think it's, I was thinking about this the other day when I'm thinking about, I suppose there can be an advantage when everyone is focused on the same goal of settlement or moving past a deadlock or something, but it's not that easy. And I'm not sure that biases are always, I'm not sure they're negative or positive, they're there. And we can call them blockers. We could call them enablers. But I think you have to understand in context of when you're delivering, you know, in a workplace mediation versus a family mediation versus a matrimonial mediation versus a commercial mediation. These biases can most of the time block you from seeing something. And something that Jawada said earlier, and I'm thinking about this as a new term. People talk about truth in mediation. For mediators, the truth in mediation is allowing the parties to find it rather than you directing it. That's the truth. There's no justice truth we're looking for. And so if the truth is to allow them to do it, then your biases may block it because you're the master of process. And so knowing when to start and when to stop and allowing people to grow, that's the big one. I'm not sure that there's advantage or disadvantages. I would call them blockers and enablers.
So what you're saying is not really being that catalyst for blocking a view, but really being a catalyst to encourage change, to allow the parties to come up with their own solution.
Yeah. If you get deadlock in a mediation, the first question you should ask yourself is not why are the parties in deadlock, is has my approach caused deadlock? Right? If we all think about that, why do parties go to a deadlock? You're the master of process. So if you should reflect immediately saying, they're in deadlock. Did I cause that? Did I enable that deadlock to happen? And was there the questioning I did, the process I used, the views I had of each party about where this might go, causing that deadlock? We're very quick to blame the parties and say, well, they just didn't want to settle. I think we have to reflect on that in a big way.
So it's about thinking whether you're an enabler or disabler.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a big responsibility as a mediator.
the biggest, I think.
Yeah. Are there any times that you can see that you would look back and say, I would have done this differently if you had managed your biases? Because Rahim, you said that it's very important not to, the worst thing is to see it at the end. But I'm going to ask the panel, Zoe, are there a time when you looked at it and you look back and you said, I wish I had done this differently?
Always, Rasmin. Because I think we all as mediators, we try to self-evaluate ourselves. And even though when we have successful mediations, and successful, of course, is a big word, we always think that some things could be done differently. Mm-hmm. And if I may, I would say that intervening in other people's conflicts is an audacious act. It's justified only if the intervention is likely to make things better, or at least not make them worse. And unfortunately, guidance in mediating ethically, and this is a wonderful opportunity that you give us, that means to have this think tank, is in short supply. I would say that after 10 years of practice, I can say that I have a sense of mediating ethically, morally. There are so many issues, and I will start with what Rahim said, supporting disputant autonomy seems to be the obviously ethical thing to do when disputants make good choice. So it's natural to want to respect and affirm decisions that are thoughtful, that are well informed and productive of positive outcomes. The challenge is what happens when disputants are inclined towards agreements that appear not to serve their long-term interests. And more complicated, at least for me, more complicated, what happens when disputants are making those decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate information. In these circumstances, the mandate to honor party self-determination intersects awkwardly, I would say, with the mediator's interest in facilitating fully informed decision-making. So it raises also questions, at least to me, as to whether a mediator bears any responsibility for the substantive, and Jawad said that, fairness of the mediated outcome. These are very difficult questions that continue, I think, to inspire spirited debate. And in my opinion, ambiguity in the code of ethics, the national code of ethics, the European code of ethics, feeds confusion regarding how much and what sort of information mediators can or should ethically provide for disputants. And although we are probably a long way from reaching broad consensus on how much information is enough, insufficient, or too much, we're now at a stage where we can identify the factors that shape our deliberations. And if I have some time, I would like to share what, in my opinion, helped me as a mediator after 10 years now to understand this very sensitive field.
I can understand. It sounds to me, Zoe, you're saying that for 10 years you've come up through a lot of different dynamics, and it's always evolving, and it's a very sensitive field. But what has been your, biggest learning when you go back and you look, and being part of the sort of European Commission of bringing best practice? What do you see has evolved, and what do you see as the biggest learning?
Very, very good question. Well, my personal and professional journey, because this requires maturity, life maturity as well. in order to understand why and how people differ in their emotional responses, as you said, Tasmin, to what life throws at them. I think it's motivated by our desire to help people. This is something that I realized from the very, very first moment. And I think that I realized that according to the mediation philosophy, and we practice the facilitative model, I feel that we are very uncomfortable giving disputants information about their alternative to settlement. And we might sharply question the parties about their assumptions as to what will happen if they end up in court, but we will not provide as mediators our own assessments for fear of departing from a neutral role and having too great an impact of the parties' negotiation. So I believe that this substantive fairness in mediation and what is a fair outcome, I would say that this is my biggest challenge through these 10 years. And if I may add something, in court, because many of us are lawyers as well, a fair outcome is the impartial application of public law by the judge to the facts that the judges find it. In mediation, substantive fairness is quite different. The parties are the decision makers. And I like the fact, and I think you agree all with me, that mediation is not a paternalistic process. Litigation and arbitration are all based on a paternalistic instinct that seeks a powerful third party who will sort things out for the disputants. Mediation is not paternalistic. And the parties not only retain the power to decide the outcome, they also retain the power to decide what information they need to move toward the resolution. And that, I think, is very, very powerful in mediation.
So if you had to look at some suggestions that you would give to mediators on this particular subject, what would that be?
I would say that this preference for informed consent would mean that as a mediator, I would properly urge a party to get professional advice if I feel that the information is not specific or is not enough. And I would challenge the legal analysis of both attorneys, because here in Greece, it's mandatory to have the lawyers present, if I see or suspect flaws in the analysis. Because for me, asking questions is central to our role as mediators, but answering questions is not. So I would say that I would be very careful regarding the facts of the dispute, and of course my role as a facilitative neutral person.
You know, you brought up another very valid point, Zoe, is that there is this almost a conflict between what the mediators aim to do and the lawyer's mandate. So, you know, the 2 points I'm just hearing about, a mediator is not a paternalistic process. And then you're saying that a suggestion is to be present to inform consent. And then you have these legal system, like you're saying in Greece, and I think in other countries in the world, where people don't see mediators as the go-to person, they go to the lawyer. And how do we break that? How do you get to see people that, look, if you go through mediation, you probably are going to have less biases, and people who want to have a most fair process, because I'm sure lawyers have a lot of biases too. So, and yet lawyers are also mediators. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to add into this. Maybe Rahim. I've just thrown, because I think it's a very valid point, and maybe that would be another panel discussion.
That was very powerful from Zoe. I'm not sure I could add.
Yeah,
the amount.
very powerful.
Thank you. May I add something on that? Final point. I would say that where parties elect to have legal counsel but choose inept lawyers, the mediator cannot make up for the deficiency, except insofar as the client or parties kept actively engaged in the mediation, and can be an ongoing judge. The party must be an ongoing judge of the competence of the attorney he has chosen. For me, this is the most powerful thing that this is the power that I should bring to the table to the parties. To be able to understand the dynamics of the mediation.
Virash, do you have anything to add to that? That any suggestions you'd give to mediators as well on this subject?
I'm obviously grateful to hear what everyone is saying right now, because to add on to that, you're constantly challenged, your competence is constantly challenged as a mediator. It's questions, it's challenged. And I can remember a student of mine, they'd qualified in mediation, and a few months later gave me a call and says, I've got my first mediation. And when he looked at the intake form, he noticed that one of the clients had appointed attorneys that had briefed him some time ago. He contacted these attorneys, and the attorney explained that because they knew who he was, and they knew he'd gone for mediation training, they believed him to be competent, and then they had convinced the other clients to use him as the mediator. And the attorney said to him, don't worry, we will let the other side know that we know you from a time ago, and left it at that. But he called me to say he's still feeling uncomfortable about the situation. And because I always say transparency is key to developing trust and maintaining an ethical standard. And for me, at that point, there were two schools of thought. The first one, play open cards and say that you worked with the other side's attorney some time ago, you're letting all the parties know this, all the participants know this, and let them know that it does not affect my impartiality in any way. And then the second school of thought would have been, look, just let it go. It's in the past. Why bring it up into these discussions? With mediation being voluntary, the parties get to choose who they want as their mediator, and they'll get to choose if they want to stay or leave. And you also give them the choice of who they want to be their mediator. And in order for them to do that, they have to make a fully informed decision. That's what I believe. So if they know who you are, and they know your experience, they know your credentials, and they're happy to deal with you based on all the information and your past experiences with any of the other participants, it shouldn't affect your impartiality if you let them know. Because if things go pear-shaped in that mediation, then they're going to turn around and say, but you knew the other client, or you knew the other attorney, and it affected your ethics. So for me, it's always important that you are play open cards, you are transparent, and you let them know, because when you're not in control of what people say and what people do in the mediation, there's only one person in that mediation that you can control, and that is yourself. So you must know who you're taking into that mediation. You must understand your biases, your prejudices, your triggers, and you must spend some time going through healing processes and self-care. Be compassionate with yourself. Don't take it hard when you've had a day where you just walked out of the mediation thinking, what did I do something wrong? I was thinking something while someone was speaking. That happens. You're human. It's going to happen to you. You go back to your mediator's toolbox, like as Rahim says. Go back to your toolkit. Be aware. Use whatever tools you have. Your active listening is important, and understand that those triggers are part of your life. They need to be managed, not suppressed, and focus on expanding your circle of support. If you feel you need support in certain issues, or just to check where did I go wrong, how did I go wrong, go seek out experienced mediators and just bounce some thoughts off them in terms of what would have been appropriate in those circumstances. The next time I go into mediation, how should I handle this? So it keeps you bound to that ethical code and a standard of practice. Because like I say, you're always managing your reputation as a mediator.
That's great. Thank you, Viraj. There's just a question from the audience. Can Zoe clarify her last point about exercising caution when getting parties to consider legal implications? Here in the UK, we're encouraged to do reality testing and enable parties to consider such implications.
I think it's a very good question, and according to the model that we all are trained and we delivered training, I would say that is a very subtle line. We have to be very careful in not to breach our neutrality and impartiality. What I would say is that I had 4 questions in my mind when I need to do that. The first one is, if each disputant represented, in Greece they are, it's mandatory. All over the world it's not the same. The second one is, does he or she, I mean the party, have access to another expert who can provide the relevant data? Is the disputant able to use and amenable to using that expert? The third one, what information is missing? Is it material to understanding the nature and consequences of the contemplated agreement? And the fourth one, what will the consequences be if the disputant enters into this agreement based on incomplete information or understanding? Who will be harmed, and will the harm be great? So for me, all these are like a navigator system to understand the dynamics of an informed decision. And when we have the lawyers present, it's much easier for us as mediators. If not, it's more complicated.
Please go to Mentimeter, menti.com, and there is an evaluation. And also let us know what else you need for this coaching club. This is the first time we tried the panel, and I think, and I hope the panelists enjoyed it. If I could just do a round robin with the panelists and just to share how focused questioning helped them and what they got out of this experience, it would be great. And if anyone wants to participate on the chat to how this experience was for you, as well as on menti.com, please do. So just a quick round robin from the panelists. I'll start with Javed. Just a closing statement.
Yeah, it is. I must thank you and ADR ODR International for this opportunity to share the views. And what was more important is I got the chance to hear a lot of insights from Zoe, from Viraj, from Rahim. And this has been quite a learning experience for me. So thank you very much. And I really hope that, I mean, your courses are very focused. And I'm sure that, undergoing those courses will help us to become definitely better mediators. At least we will be conscious of our moral compass, so to say.
Thank you. Viraj?
Thank you, Tasneem. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Thank you, ADR, ODR, for including me. And like Jawad said, it's always interesting to hear what mediators have to say, because we're always, as Zoe said, evolving and learning. So everyone, good luck and enjoy this. It's a good place to be.
Zoe?
Thank you very much as well. I've learned so much, and I think this field, Tasneem, is so crucial for all of us. And thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
And closing remarks by Rahim.
Well, first of all, thank you to all the people that have joined us from so many different parts of the world. And it's not a breakfast club for all of you. It's a lunch club. It's a dinner club. So thank you for coming on board. Thank you to Tasneem for a fantastic session, hosting us and getting us to focus on a really important issue. To Viraj, Zoe, and Jawad, my esteemed colleagues, always a pleasure to share a platform with you and to learn from you. And I think to all of you who are listening, I want to say one thing to you. This area of peacemaking, mediating, listening to people, understanding them and us, is such a deep and rich area that you're realizing now that even a 40-hour program, 50-hour program, a master's program is not going to be enough. This is part of lifelong learning for those of us in this field. And just because, you know, the 3-4 of us who have been speaking as panelists have been mediating for some time means that we don't know everything, and we keep continually learning. So don't stop learning. We need more of these kinds of sessions. And for those of you that are ready to deep dive, I really think you should deep dive and learn more. And if you feel able to commit to some of the things that Tasneem is offering, I can only see benefit for all of you. So the very best to all of you. Thank you for joining. I know we're just 2-3 minutes over our time, and we're all got to get back to our jobs and other things that we have to do. So over to you, Tasneem, to say bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. And thank you. And thank you again to the panelists.
Yeah.
And let's
Can I
hope
ask the panelists to stay online, please? Yeah, thank you to everyone.
And let's hope we can mediate through our unconscious and conscious biases and navigate those emotions. Thank you and bye-bye.
Tasneem, can you?
Yes, I'm just doing a last chat.
And do you want to stop recording?
Yes.